Yeah, first, it's one of the few times this season we've only had one NBA playoff game. We had one, of course, on Saturday with game one between the Nuggets and T-Wolves. It's that time of year that we're going to have two games each of the next following nights, but we're going to have a lot of nights with just one game. So we will be taking deep dives, and it's appropriate that we have one game tonight because the three of us that are on the show today, myself, Steve Merrill, Ross Benjamin coming up next, Teddy Covers, we are doing this every day, taking a deep dive into the NBA playoffs here with the solo videos on WagerTalk TV. So I recommend the viewers check those out. I do have an in-depth 15-minute video on this game alone on the channel right now. Side, total, multiple player props. Ross is going to talk more about the total, so I'll look at the side. The first thing I'll point out is that the Pacers are a public dog in this game. Now, I don't do a lot with sentiment indicators in the NBA. I use it more in the NFL, as you all know. But it is worth noting the public is on the Pacers, but the public was also on the Pacers in game one as a 6-point dog, and although they didn't win straight up, they did get the cover, losing by 4. They actually had a 9-point lead in that game. Knicks never led by more than 8. And the free throw shooting was the difference. The Knicks got to the line 7 times more, and they made 7 more free throws. And, of course, there were some controversial calls in the game. A reviewed kickball that shouldn't have been called. They still reviewed it, upheld it, and then the official said afterwards it was missed. Don't quite understand how that happens. Also a moving screen late. So this was a very tight game. My concern, though, for the Indiana bounce-back spot, which does look like it's live here, is Halliburton. He's once again on the injury report with lower back spasms. He played game one, but if you look at how he played in game one, he is not healthy, and I do not think he's healthy tonight, but I do expect him to go, and that makes handicapping very tricky when you have such a key player. Halliburton's a great shooter, but he's not really a points guy. He's an assist guy, the best assist guy in the NBA this year. When he was out for a month or so earlier this season, the Pacers did struggle, and they went from being a pure over team to more of an under team. With him struggling in game one, and by the way, he was only 2 for 6, only 2 for 5 from 3, had only 6 points and only 8 assists. The game still soared over the total, though, of course, with 238 points, and we did cash with the over. That's where I was for my client play in game one, over the 217. And one of the things I pointed out, and Ross will talk more about the total, much lower than the regular season. We had 248, 235, 237 in those 3 regular season games. Just a 217. This was priced at 221 last night. Now it's down to 218. So we have seen some under money come in. I do a mathematical rescore based on the pace. I actually got exactly 217. The teams both shot lights out, but it wasn't as fast of a pace. I want to look at a couple player props, though, while we're talking about this game. First of all, I talked about Josh Hart in my video for game one. I mentioned how he did not do much in the 3 regular season meetings, but he exploded once again in game one. He's having an excellent playoffs. You got to be careful with Hart because he is getting more shot attempts. They're using him more than when these teams played in December and early February. With that said, though, you talk about perfection. Josh Hart played every second of game one. He played 48 minutes, and he had 24 points, 9 for 13 shooting, 1 for 1 from 3, and he got to 24. Now, obviously, that went well over his total of 14 and a half. He had 16, 18, and 4 the 3 previous games against Philly. Every playoff game had been 14 and a half or lower. Many of them were 13 and a halves, even 11 and a halves. Now it's 16 and a half. So if you're going to look for Josh Hart to regress, I think it probably happens tonight. I like Josh Hart under 16 and a half points for that reason, especially since Indiana is in bounce back mode. I would be careful with the Halliburton props because once again, if he plays, which I think he will, the props are a go. I'm not saying to play him under necessarily on assists because he's such an assist guy, but I think his points could be worth a look at for an under on the Indiana side. I just don't think Halliburton is fully healthy. Yeah, I wanted to talk about the Reds for a couple reasons. Also going to look at the total in this game. But, I mentioned several weeks ago, that I thought Cincinnati was one of those teams early on that was a little misleading. And the reason I said that was because first couple of weeks of the season, really the first month of the season, they were averaging almost 5.5 runs a game. Really explosive offensively if you look at that metric, and they had a pretty good record overall. But I'm a big proponent on batting average hits. I think it gets lost in modern baseball. Everyone looks at starting pitchers who go less than half the game sometimes. Everybody looks at launch angle, home runs. But the offensive lineup, when they're consistently putting the ball in play, good things can happen. And the one thing that jumped out to me about the Reds' decent start, their high-scoring average, is they weren't hitting the ball. They're averaging like 5.5 runs a game on like a barely over a 200 batting average. And when I see that happen, whether it's overall season or in a short-term 10, 15-game sample, I think the batting average is the true indicator, and that's been proven to be correct here because the Reds are now averaging less than 4.5 runs a game. That's almost a 20% drop over the past month. and they're still barely batting over 200 for the season. So my point is, keep an eye on hits, batting average. I think it's something that's not incorporated fully into the baseball averages, the baseball betting numbers every day, and it's something I take advantage of. With that said, Cincinnati is ice cold. They've lost 6 straight games. They've had 8 hits or less in 6 straight. They've actually had 6 hits or less in each of their last 5 games. Arizona is red hot offensively, 17 runs the last 2 games, 21 hits. In fact, they've had 8 hits or more in 3 straight. I do lean over 9 in this game, and I do like that key number of 9. I'm a little concerned with the Reds getting there, though, so I think the best way to attack this is a team total. We get both team totals at 4.5. The one I trust a lot more is Arizona. So I like the over 9, but if it's going to get there, it's going to definitely have to be Arizona getting to 5 or more. Diamondbacks in better current form and a much better offensive team. So take a look at the D-backs over 4.5 runs here in this game. Early first pitch, 6:40 Eastern tonight on Wednesday.
I'm going to concentrate on the total, and I'm going to get into the first 5 total, as a matter of fact. But let me start with the 2 starting pitchers here, Teddy. I mean, George Kirby right now in tremendous form off his last 3 starts, 6 innings pitched per start, a 0.50 ERA, a 0.72 WHIP, an 11-to-1 strikeout to walk ratio, which is great numbers. And this is a Mariners team. It's no strangers to them to be playing in low-scoring games. As a matter of fact, the Mariners have only gone over the total in 4 of their last 26 games. In those 26 games, average a combined 6.6 runs per game. And during that stretch, the Mariners pitching has really carried them, as they're only allowing 2.6 runs per game over their last 26. And when we get into this number of 7 and 7.5, not uncommon right now for a team like the Mariners getting good pitching and not a lot of hitting. And they've gone 8-0 to the under in their last 8, whenever the total is 7 or 7.5. And in those games, they're only allowing 1.5 runs per game. Now, we know that the Mariners aren't a great hitting team right now, Teddy, getting great pitching. But when you get in the 7.5 area, chances are they're facing a good pitcher, and they're also facing a team that's not hitting really well. The Twins have been sporadic in that regard offensively. But I know one thing, Chris Paddock, their starter tonight, he had 1 bad outing, 2 bad outings actually this year. Both came on the road. But over his last 3, a 2.00 ERA, a 1.00 WHIP, averaging 6 innings pitched per start. Notice that I always concentrate on how many innings a starting pitcher is giving you on average over at least a decent sample size of 3 starts. 3 starts at home. All 3 of those games go under the total, and his 1.02 ERA had a lot to do with those low-scoring affairs. The wind blowing in at about 10 miles an hour tonight at Target Field, which will help the pitchers in that regard. And here's the thing. You might ask, well, Russ, why don't you just go under the total in the 9 innings? Well, I don't trust the Twins bullpen. You look over the last 7 games of Twins, 7.77 ERA, and then their WHIP is 1.48. So when I see that, okay, wait a minute, we got a high ERA with a WHIP that's approaching 1.50, which is borderline bad to me. But when I see that, I automatically look and say, how many long balls are they giving up? Well, they've given up 5 home runs in the last 24 and the third innings over that 7-game stretch. So I'm going to cut them completely out of the equation, Teddy. And I am going to go under the total of 4 at moneyline odds of -120. Now, there are 3.5s out there, and you're going to have to lay some heavy juice at 4. If you can't get a 4, I'm still on board with going under 3.5 as well.
Wow.
Stay tuned, because I think Teddy's going to have a field day with his retort on this. I just have that feeling. And that's okay, because that makes for interesting talk. But I'm going to look at the total here, and it's 218.5. The Knicks coming off that game 1, 121-117 win. You look at the analytics in the NBA, and the Knicks are like bottom 3 when it comes to fast tempo. They're actually in the slow tempo range. Yet, you look at the results, not only in the playoffs, but over the latter half of the year, they've gone over the total in 16 of 19 games. Now, the opposition will tell you, well, look at their totals, though. Their average total is really low. Well, over those 19 games, you're right. The average total was 211.7, but they also scored around 226 points per game combined in that time. And they've also shot 39.3% over those 19 games from 3-point range, which, again, when you think of the Knicks, you don't think of this dynamic 3-point shooting team with the exception of Jalen Brunson. They've also gone 4-0 to the over this year at home, coming off a home game in which they scored 120 or more, like they're in that situation today. And the Pacers, this is a team, I don't care if you're a slow tempo team. Now, Steve made a good point. He said, you look at the field goal attempts for both teams in the prior game, and it was slow tempo. Well, yeah, it might indicate it's slow tempo, but it's a little bit deceiving because both teams shot the ball extremely well. And when that happens, it's very difficult to find two teams that are going to shoot over 50% and have over 90 field goal attempts, in that game. If we're talking that, we're talking a total in the 230s, 240s, in my opinion. So in their 4 games against the Knicks this year, the Pacers over like 122 per game, 54% shooting, 45.8% from the field. When you think of the Knicks, you think of Tom Thibodeau coach teams, you think of defensive play. The reason I can make sense of that is, to me, Indiana shares the ball better than anybody in the NBA. I think the announcer hit it best, or the analyst hit it best in the last game. The ball doesn't stick with Indiana on offense. They share the ball. They're very athletic. Their flaw, obviously, is their defensive play. And they're one of those up-tempo teams that are willing to take 3 shots to give you one good one. They've shot 51% or better in 10 of their last 14, scored 117 or more in 10 of their last 12. So I just think that, again, when you look at the totals during the regular season between these teams, and Steve mentioned this, drastically different, right, Prez? But I'm not going to get scared away with the money that's brought this from 220.5 down to 218 in the last 2 hours. I'm going to still go over the total.
Take advantage of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's talk big game breakdown for Wednesday night in MLB. A little national TV action on MLB TV. The Red Sox in Atlanta for the finale of their 2-game set against the Braves. Lost last night. Will they bounce back tonight? I'm not so sure. We're looking at the WagerTalk live odds screen right now. Full game for this contest. I'm seeing Atlanta in the minus 190, minus $2 range, 2-1 favorites. Total sitting at 8.5. I'm going to take the bullpens out of the equation for this game because I'm concerned about the Braves bullpen right now with a couple of key guys, Matzek on the DL, Johnson on the DL for Atlanta. They used key arms last night as well. So let's just keep this in the first 5 innings. All right, the Red Sox, in my mind, are a pretty easy team to handicap, in theory. They're mediocrity defined. They're a 500 level team. They were aligned as a 500 level team. They're playing like a 500 level team. So the Red Sox go on a winning streak. They get 3-4 games over 500. I'm looking for spots to fade them. They get 3-4 games below 500. I'll look for spots to back them. Well, they're above 500 right now. Of course, they're coming off a 1-14 game, but they went 1 for 14 with runners in scoring position in a 2-run loss last night. And today they have to go against Chris Sale, who his last 2 starts. I wondered if Sale would be able to come back and be good. He's been real good in each of his last 2 trips to the hill. Nick Pivetta coming off the DL. He's been out with an elbow strain for the better part of the last month. He has a bad track record against Atlanta. He had a bad start at AAA in rehab action. In my mind, this makes a lot of sense for a first 5 wager. Atlanta kind of slumped on their West Coast trip. Saw some solid form last night. I think they're worth backing here in the first 5, -0.5. And again, when you talk about -0.5, a run line bet for the first 5 innings with the Braves, they got to win by 1 right now. WagerTalk live odds screen. You can get that -125, -130 as a wager worthy of consideration. There's your big game breakdown. Braves, first 5 innings, -0.5 run. Back to you, Mr. Perez.
We'll make these two games very quick. Listen, Florida minus 105. You can lay the 170 on Florida if you're comfortable laying that price. I never am. I'm taking them in regulation tonight. They did game one off a longer layoff. They played the Bruins coming with a bit of momentum with only 1 day's rest after beating the Leafs. And they still shut down the Bruins' top two lines, but the Bruins got secondary scoring and scoring from their defense. And it was a looser Florida team than we've seen. They've dominated in the playoffs, Florida, that is, the analytic numbers in 5 of 6 games, including the Boston game, where the analytics were 3.4 to 3.16. The only game in which they were behind in analytics was a loss to Tampa Bay, and they followed that up with a big 6-1 win next time out. They're going to do the same thing here. Florida rebounds off a bad game and wins this one to even up the series at 1. Noon Pacific, 3 Eastern time, and this is a good one. Game one in Germany finished 2-2. And if you watch that game, and I know you didn't, Teddy, but if you guys watched that game, you saw that Real Madrid were the better team in that game. Again, dominated the analytics point of view as far as expected goals. But they're returning home now, everything to play for, a spot in the finals against Borussia Dortmund, who won yesterday against PSG. And this Real Madrid team, 14-time title winners, they just don't lose games at home. They are this year in all competitions at home, unbeaten in 24 games, 20 wins, 4 draws. Of that, in this competition, 3-1-1 in this competition at home. 12-6. That was a 3-0-2, 12-6 goal differential. This is a very good team. And the one thing that's going to happen today, I believe, that happened in game one is Bayern just don't have an answer for Vinicius Jr. and his speed, Real Madrid attacking. He scored 2 goals in that game, one to put him up, one to equalize. The guy is such a talent. They have no answer for his speed. I think Madrid get out in front, and I think they double up on it and go on to win. Minus 110 is a very low price here. I get it. It's graded on 90 minutes. So if this game is tied after 90 minutes and any injury time, it will go to 30 minutes of extra time and possibly penalties. But I don't see that happening. I think a better coach squad with Carlo Ancelotti, the Italian manager, and I'm taking Real Madrid minus 110 to make it to another finals in Champions League.
Hey, everybody, it's Lawrence Presman, the Prez from WagerTalk Today. We got our penalty box segment going. I got 2 bets to give out for you. Let's start right off the bat with the 2:20 Eastern baseball game. The San Diego Padres playing the Chicago Cubs, and what a great pitching matchup in this one. Cease taking on Wisniewski. Wind is blowing in from center field, and that is a huge factor in this bet for me. Both pitchers have been amazing all season long analytically, and I think they continue that today. The problem with both these teams right now really is the bullpen, so we're going to take that out of the equation. I'm going with under 4 runs in the first half of this game, the first 5 innings. Under 4 runs.